Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John, Coffee and the Bull. I want to say thank y'all for taking a moment out of your day and giving us a listen. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's something me and John's been working on for a couple weeks now. A topic that kind of covers a lot of ground, but it's definitely something that weighs down on guys, pulls you one way or the other, and kind of adds a little bit of instability to your life. So. In a previous episode, we had made a statement, and we got a lot of feedback about it. Different people want us to kind of expound on it a little bit, so that's kind of where we're at now. And the statement that was made was referencing being a dad and explaining to your kids, hey, there's different things we teach them. You teach your kid how to throw a curveball, how to ride a bicycle, how to change oil in a car. Those are all things guys enjoy teaching their kids, because it's interaction, it's back and forth.
Rite of passage.
And yeah, it's a rite of passage. But what happens is we focus on that, and it doesn't make us bad parents. It doesn't make our parents bad for doing it. But by focusing in that area, we unintentionally left an area that's right. Not resolved. And that brought up, hey, why would a dad want to tell a child that the boogeyman is going to be this nicest monster he's ever met?
Right.
And when you start looking at, this is stepping out of the realms of, werewolves and vampires and,
Bigfoot.
all that Bigfoot, all those monsters that, hey, we're intrigued with, even though, hey, for, Louisiana, our area, Rougarous are, kind of
right.
a localized monster lore or
it's
whatever.
Basically a spicy werewolf.
Right. It's a spicy werewolf. They go to crawfish bowls, but they're very scary type monsters. But we're intrigued with them,
Right.
and I think a lot of it is we'll never see them, and so that's
escape
part of
from
it there.
reality type thing.
Right. It's an escape from reality. So. But what you run into is you've got guys who, hey, you're on your way home from work, or, you can't sleep at night, so you get up, you don't want to wake the family up, so you're sitting there watching TV or in the living room, or just not watching TV, you're just playing on your phone or whatever, sitting in the dark. And the monsters that come crawling into your brain are kind of the biggest sources of anxiety that, I know that I've got, and it's not, I would give anything for those to be, a werewolf or a bear or something, something like that, but instead it's, and I think this is going to really relate with a lot of guys, is feelings of inadequacy and, hey, you're a failure, you're the struggles in your marriage, those are because you're a crappy man, or, your kids are focusing on Minecraft, they're not focusing on you, so you're obviously a crappy dad, and you got all these different things that come up, and man, you can start concreting that monster in your brain really easy, when
Becoming
you don't
your
know
own
how
monster.
to combat it,
Yeah. And so that's kind of what we've been working on for the past couple of weeks is trying to figure out the right way to navigate this. And so one of the things, like Mike was saying, we teach our kids all this stuff, and as dads, we're aiming towards the goal of their survivability and sustainability. Mm-hmm. Because we know that as our kids grow older, we're not all going to make it to that point. Some of us aren't going to make it to their graduations or their weddings and stuff like that. And so we try to prepare them for the most common battles that they're going to have in life, like changing your oil, changing your tires, things like that. And we don't focus on the things that make us look, in their eyes, vulnerable or weak, which is kind of where the topic of, hey, that boogeyman, if that's all you're afraid of, that's the best fear you can have.
Right.
That's, because it's not the monster that you become, because, and I'm not saying a monster is and you're a bad guy, I'm not saying anything like that, but when you're fighting yourself in the middle of the night, you're fighting your own monster.
Right.
And that's why we fascinate, like my big thing is the zombies, and it's an unattainable achievement, but in reality, like in my brain, I'm like, I could handle a horde of zombies. Realistically, probably not, because there's eventually run out of bullets, but it's the middle of the night, or when I'm sitting by myself at work or whatever, that I'm battling that monster in my head that's like, you've got failed marriages, you've got, your kids are looking for you
Right.
for answers, and you've got nothing on the table. And so the episode is really geared towards that. It's that monster that you create where, and I know we've all done it. Every person I know has had an argument. I call them the re-argument from like 20 years ago, where you're in high school and you're like, oh, I wish I could have said that, or I should have done this differently. And honestly, I don't know how you amend that to get it out of your brain. I don't know how you let
Right.
it go. But that's the monster you're fighting. That's the monster you become or you create in your head, and it gets you to a point when you're battling the, I've got to make the mortgage payment, I've got to make the utility payment, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't have answers. And that's our problem, is that we're guys and we want the answer, we want the solution, we want to be the person that everybody looks up to and says, hey, this is my problem, Dad, or this is my problem, honey. And we go, hey, bam, too easy, I got you. This is how you handle that.
Right.
And when it's your problem, and it's something I've said myself, I can solve everybody else's problems but my own. I've got a solution for everything. Or, I think we did it in Welcome to the Shit Show, where we were like, hey, there's not something that you've been through that we haven't experienced
Right.
ourselves. And if we haven't, by some rare chance that we haven't, we know some people. We'll make some phone calls and find your answer. And I think that's just the guy dad in us, that we want to help and we want to be that dad for everybody else, that we lose sight of helping ourselves.
Right.
And that's kind of where we're going down this road, because you get into these thought processes, and it gets you to a point where, like, I know we had a conversation the other night where we were talking about counseling and it helping people, and how talking to somebody can really get weight off your chest. Whether it's a counselor or a psychologist or just a friend, it can get the weight off. And sometimes that will help you from not going all the way to the point of that final checkout.
Right.
And I know one of the things or revelations I had when we were having the conversation was, I suggest and I tell a lot of people, hey, I want you to go to counseling. I want you to get help. I want you to talk about it, because I don't want people to end up like I am myself,
Right.
where I personally feel that I'm so far gone that the best thing I can do is just try to be better than I was. And that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Well, so I know that in our conversation we had the other night, it was, you brought up a good point, and for some of the listeners who aren't aware, we started this podcast as not as in spite of therapy, or a psychologist,
Right.
or seeking mental help somewhere. It was, obviously those things play a role, but where we're lacking is guys don't go and try to get some help. They don't talk to people because they don't. I think part of it is embarrassment.
Yeah.
You don't want to be embarrassed, and that's just kind of one of the monsters that you face. Is you don't want people knowing your business, and you brought up a good point where, I'm to clarify some things or whatever. I currently go to a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, a therapist. I don't know exactly what the
Right.
designation is, but it has been very, very, very beneficial for me.
Yep.
It's pulled me out of a very dark spot. And I would definitely say I would not be in the mind space that I am now had it not been for that.
Right.
And so I don't try to tell people to shy away from that by any
Right.
means, but there's a lot of guys who you won't go see somebody because, one, either your health insurance doesn't cover it and you can't afford it, which is the main thing. We
Right,
don't,
yeah.
if you got to try to find $60 to cover the cost of changing oil in your car, you're not going to go drop that on a
Exactly.
mental health expert,
Exactly.
because it's an unseen wound,
Yeah.
you can ignore it for a while and you think there's not an issue. But you had brought up a point the other night in our conversation, because I talk to my therapist different than I do anybody else.
Yep.
And when I was asking, like we were talking about, hey, why do you think that is? Why is it that, like I love my wife to death. We've been married for 15 years. We've been together since 2005. We've definitely logged a lot of time together. She's listened to a lot of the dumb ideas that I've had. And
Right.
don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of dumb ideas that I've had. Some of them she supported me in. Some of them she's blatantly said absolutely not.
Right.
And it saved me from doing a lot of dumb stuff. But we've walked that road together a lot,
Right.
and there's not very much that I don't tell her. But I found that I talk to her differently than I do my therapist. It's not, but I also talk to the therapist differently than I do you. And a
Right.
couple other guys that I've got that I know that I can be unapologetically vulnerable with, and not have to worry about it. I talk different, and or I tell her, or I tell the therapist different things than I would, anybody else. And so, you brought up the point, if my wife's never done it to me, never thrown anything up in my face, but it's also one of the things where, hey, you don't want to go
Right.
throw everything out and it be weaponized against you. I don't tell you everything because I know how it's going to end with you. You're going to be making a joke about something. And don't get me wrong, our jokes serve a purpose. They
Yep.
they really do. And you don't tell other people because you just don't want them in your business. So it's like that therapist serves serves a purpose. But we've got to get past that embarrassment level of saying, hey, I just don't want people in my business. I don't want them to think that I'm weak. I don't want them to think, hey, that maybe I am becoming the monster, because
Right.
that's the other side of the coin. We deal with monsters day in and day out. Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are very, hit and miss, guerrilla warfare type tactics or whatever. You're not. I don't know of anybody who day in and day out is staring, self destruction in the face. Where it's like,
Right.
hey, every single day, just hey, if I could just make it past this hour or whatever. I don't know anybody like that, but it comes in waves.
Yeah.
Because I've been in that spot before, and it comes in waves where you're just like, man, I don't know how I'm getting through this, and so you go and you talk to somebody, you talk to a friend, and it brings up a spot where, hey, that helped me out, and so it gets a little bit better, and then it cycles back around. It's because that monster's not dying, it's not going anywhere,
Right.
and for those of you, if you may not call it a monster, you may call it a demon, you may call it, struggle or whatever. We're just referring to monsters. That's just,
Yeah.
that's a theme that we both kind of enjoy, and that's kind of where we're trying to focus it. But we're talking about the same things, and I think for me, the feelings of inadequacy or honestly fear of becoming somebody that I don't want to be
Right.
is a big thing. Especially in law enforcement, it's very easy to become that guy who, hey, you're 15, 20 years in, and you're just a grumpy guy that nobody wants to talk to.
Right.
Nobody starts, especially our career. You start, you're bright eyed, bushy tailed, you're excited, you want to change the world, and you look. I remember when I first started. My very first day, we were having my field training officer called it shift meeting, right? And we were going to take and go meet with the other guys on the shift. So I'm like, oh, this is like roll call or whatever. I had no idea what we were doing. We were going to a coffee house and just sitting there drinking coffee. That's all we were doing. That and telling stories and
Right,
getting to know
right.
each other. That's all it was. It was no supervisors weren't there or anything like that.
Right.
But I remember I walked in and there's this guy. He's got the grumpiest look on his face ever, and I'm like, I'm sitting back and I'm just watching it, and it's just like, I don't want to be this guy,
Right.
just, 15, 20 years in and just mad at life, and so for me that was one of the things is like, I don't want to become that guy. And then I turn around, 5, 6, 7 years in, and it's like, no, am I going down that road? Am I
Right.
becoming,
Am I
am I
that guy?
becoming that guy?
Right.
Who's just angry at I got in this to help people, but now I don't want anybody to call at all, and so it's
Right.
like it's one of the things where it's like, okay, there's different battles that you've got to face, and you don't really know where to go.
Right. And that was kind of my point was, when you're talking to a therapist, there's no fear of backlash.
Right.
And when they give you their guidance or their advice, you don't look at them as, oh, it's just my friend making a statement or a joke, or that's just my spouse, criticizing me or giving me some dumb idea. You don't automatically have that negated idea or context of what they're going to say.
Right.
It's somebody you deem as a professional when you pay for their services, that they're going to steer you in a better direction. And that's kind of my thing. And as a friend, there's things that we've discussed that, there's always a preface like, hey, look, this between you and I, and that's, as a good friend, that's got to stay locked up. And there's things you give to your significant other that I'm positive, and I mean, I don't know firsthand, but I know from my personal experience when I've talked to a significant other, I don't have to give them that preface of, hey, between you and I.
Right.
But at the same time, it became like, it was actually a big thorn in my side in one of my previous marriages, that I understand the need for a friend that you can convey the things that happen in your marriage to, but that friend has got to be somebody who isn't going to come up later and is, oh, I'm team this or team that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't expect, friends, and to put it more into context, because I feel like that's a little confusing. Every issue we would have, my ex would go to 3 or 4 different friends, and oh, this is the problems that we're having, and this is what this is, and this is what this is. And then I started to notice that, for functions or like, parties at houses or holidays or whatever, if I got invited, it was the most uncomfortable that I'd been, because it was like I had no idea that they knew what problems were going on.
Right.
And I'm getting these like side eyes and these weird off the wall comments, and I'm like, man, what is going on? Like, that's so strange. And so you've got to find that confidant that can kind of tell the difference between this is a today argument, mm-hmm. and this is a lasting disagreement that may need a more complex, involvement. But